Hello and welcome to the Scouting Board, episode 12. I'm your host, Billy, and today we are going to be looking at a cornerback from this draft class, the 2023 NFL draft class. Obviously, the draft wrapped up about last month, almost 2 months ago, I would want to say at this point. It's been pretty far away at this point. But a new thing about what we're doing here at the Scouting Board now is that obviously we've seen from the previous 3 seasons that we're not putting out a lot of content, we're not getting a lot of evaluations out before the actual draft, which is usually our regular window. So instead, we're going to be evaluating these guys up until pretty much the start of the regular season here and trying to get more content out for you guys. Obviously, we've already put out more stuff pre-draft than we ever have before. Very proud of that over here. But we're going to start putting out stuff now after the draft. And really, obviously, it's OTAs, so we can't really get a full picture of these prospects yet. So we don't have necessarily new information on these guys, and we possibly could in the coming months, but as of right now we don't. And so it's pretty much going to be the same thing, just we know pretty much where they got drafted, and we'll stack that up against how I pretty much evaluated these guys, where I think they should have went and where their actual value was kind of evaluated in the actual draft. So let's get into this episode right here. We're evaluating today a cornerback from the University of Maryland, Deonte Banks, who went 24th overall to the New York Giants in the actual draft, right around where he was projected to go in the mid to late first round. I thought Deonte Banks coming out, and we'll get into this obviously during the evaluation, was the best cornerback in this draft class by a good sizable mile based off of just his production on the field. He had limited production, and we'll get into that, but even so, in his final season at Maryland, had great production, and I think has by far the best physical attributes and kind of mindset that you can get out of a corner in this draft class that was very heavy in corners, I think, at the top, and some people think that it kind of dropped off at the back half of the draft, but we'll get into some guys like Corey Trice out of Purdue in later episodes that I thought was just a tremendous prospect, and even some guys that went undrafted. Rutgers had a few guys this year that showed a lot, I think, and everybody's evaluations of certain positions are going to be different. I think corners, for me at least, was a very, very mixed bag in terms of what the public's perception of these players were coming into the draft and kind of what my perception was, and that usually doesn't happen a lot. But I found in 2023 that my evaluations of players, corners in this draft, was far different than what NFL draft, analysts thought of the draft. And take that for what it's worth. But I'm gonna give you this is what this show is for. I'm gonna give you the reasons why I think the certain player should be placed in a certain way, and I think Deonte Banks was a guy that we somewhat agreed on, but overall, I thought he was the number one corner in this draft. A lot of these guys had him around 2, 3, 4, sometimes even farther than that. He's the fourth corner off the board. Yeah, fourth corner off the board in the actual draft after Witherspoon went 6th overall to the Lions. Then Christian Gonzalez went 17th to my Patriots, which you'll hear about in future episodes. Wasn't too thrilled about, as everybody else was, but don't call me crazy. You can find my reasoning for that in a future episode. And then Emmanuel Forbes went 16th before Christian Gonzalez was actually taken. He went to the Commanders. So the Giants, I think, really got a snag here, and I will start to tell you why. So first of all, Banks is a redshirt junior. He's standing 6 foot, 197 is what he went in at the combine. That's what he measured in as. He's 22 years old, so played a full 4 years. Was in college for a full 4 years, didn't play a full 4 years, obviously the red shirt. But he's not a young guy, he's not old, right in the middle. mature type of player, has that experience and isn't going to really be a problem in terms of age. Good build. And the first pro that obviously, if you haven't heard the show or seen the show, watched the show on YouTube or anything like that before, what we go through is I'm gonna give you the pros of this prospect. I'm gonna give you the cons of this prospect. I'm gonna tell you the comparisons of the prospect. We're gonna watch a little bit of his plays, and then I'm gonna give you the grade that I believe fits the certain prospect. So that's pretty much the rundown here. But the first pro is Deonte Banks went absolutely crazy at the combine, and this is where I say that this kid is a physical freak because he is a physical freak. And the good thing about being a physical freak, right? Like a Byron Jones type of player that has this big combine performance. Byron Jones coming out of UConn, relatively unknown before he came to the combine. Then he broke the vertical jump record and was just all over the board. Just the athleticism score that they give out at the combine for him was through the roof. And then he ends up getting taken by the Cowboys in the first round. Right. This can make a lot of players' careers and can really boost them up in the draft. I think that's what kind of happened here with Deonte Banks. But having a player that's athletic, especially at the corner position, which I believe is the hardest position to play in the NFL, in football in general, just because you're on the field for far more than a wide receiver. Wide receiver is going to get subbed out. Corners are pretty much in there, especially if you're a number one outside boundary type of guy. So you're pretty much playing the whole game, running up and down the field, 30 yards per play. You have to follow hips. You have to be, make pretty much navigating the defense, depending on your, stature on the team, calling plays, getting everybody set. It's a very challenging, demanding position, and that's why you see a lot of corners, not making it too far in their careers because talent can only take you so far, but you really have to have all these elements. And people will say quarterbacks, but quarterbacks don't have to run that much. They don't have to get banged up as much. And I'd argue that corners, have almost that same like mental responsibility, with just having to maintain all those things, those mental checks, following the receiver, studying wide receivers, and having all that type of stuff that quarterbacks have to do as well. It's just vice versa on the other side of the ball type of thing. And it can be really tough on them. And obviously the game is much tougher on their bodies, especially having 6'5" guys, on a 5'11" outside corner, it's unbelievable what they can do. So it's a really tough thing. But going back to, being athletic freaks, what's good for Deonte Banks about that is that, even if Deonte Banks was not too good in college, right? He had let's say, and I'm not saying he had this because he didn't, but let's say Deonte Banks, his senior season came in with a 100 passer rating against or something just atrocious like that, right? Well, he's 6'1", 197, which doesn't pop off the screen when you're just reading it, right? But you look at him on tape, right? Big frame. You can tell the guy puts in a lot of work in the gym. He ran a 4.35 at the combine, fastest out of all the corners. So he can run with any receiver you want him to run with. All you really got to do if your guy has all these physical attributes is to basically make sure they know coverages, teach them coverages, work on their footwork, which, can be taught. It's easier if it comes naturally, but footwork can be taught, of course. And, hips are always the big things, and, reading certain plays and routes. So, that type of, that mental stuff is great if you have it. That's why Bryce Young went so high, despite his, lack of physical stature. And that being an example, it can swing both ways. You can have the mental side and that can boost you up, or you can have the physical side and that can boost you up. But you can't teach natural talent and physical attributes. You can't teach it. That's why guys like Anthony Richardson went so high. That's why he went 4th overall. If Anthony Richardson wasn't 6'5" and had all 220 and could run like a running back and throw like Josh Allen out here, if he didn't have all that and he was just an average quarterback and he put up those same stats, if he was like Jake Hayner's size and put up those stats, average stature for a quarterback, the kid wouldn't get any looks. Maybe a practice squad. Maybe a practice squad. So, and I know I'm talking about quarterbacks here, but it's important to have those athletic attributes because you can develop those, and that's what coaches look for. And it kind of reassures your investment on a certain player like Deonte Banks. Because if Banks isn't good initially, if you have the right people around him, which I think the Giants coaching staff is perfect for this. Brian Dable was the offensive coordinator in Buffalo, but was around a great defense headed by Sean McDermott as the head coach of the Bills over there. Had a great secondary with Tre'Davious White and Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde and all these guys. He's been around that. He knows how to build a successful defense that, plays gutsy, that can run with wide receivers, that is physical at the line, type of attributes that Banks has. He'll know how to develop Deonte Banks, and I think the coaching staff that he's built around the team, especially last year, he showed a lot. The Giants didn't have a really stacked roster. It was tough to name certain players on that defense, on that secondary, in that wide receiver room if you weren't, a Giants fan, or even if you were, it was tough because it was so much change from the previous season that it looked like they were rebuilding. But no, that defense was a pretty decent defense. It got them all the way to the playoffs, I believe. So, he's in the right developmental spot, and having all those combine attributes really helped. And I think having all this stuff, as long as he doesn't deal with too many more injuries, having this will keep him in the league for sure. And I mean, let's just look over some of this stuff. So 4.35 40-yard dash, best as a cornerback in the combine, really, really good. He had a 42-inch vertical jump. Mans can really get up there, in an 11 and 4-inch broad jump. Pretty good. He didn't test in the bench press or the 3-cone drill, but it was really, really good there. For cornerbacks, total scores at the combine, this is calculated by the NFL. He had an 87, which ranked third in corners, and then his athleticism score, which tests pretty much everything from that vertical jump, 3-cone drills, 40-yard dashes. He scored a 98, which was the top rank for a corner in this draft. So he, by far, is the most athletic corner in this draft, and a guy that really has all the traits out of all the corners in this draft. He's the one that has the most traits that can be developed into a top corner. He has the highest ceiling in this draft by far. By far, he has the highest ceiling. And you can say Christian Gonzalez with that big frame. Gonzalez is like 6'3" or something. He's lanky though. Has good hip movement and was okay. His biggest trait was ball hawk, which I don't love because I like to evaluate corners based on their passes defended and how tight they play in their coverage and their coverage rating, which I think is much more valuable because Darrelle Revis wasn't known for getting all these interceptions. He was known for not being thrown at because they knew he was gonna knock the ball down. They knew he was gonna pick it off if they threw it towards him. So if you're getting targeted less because you've already been proven, like a Sauce Gardner coming out of college, he wasn't all about the interceptions. It was more so he was, the coverage rating was like a 24.5, and Deonte Banks doesn't have that. No corner coming out, I think, in a long time will ever have that again. Sauce Gardner was coming out of college the best corner prospect I have seen in my whole entire life, and I still believe that. I think he's already the best corner in the NFL right now, based off, and he translated perfectly over, and he's a 6'3" guy too. Great physical attributes from Sauce Gardner. So the physical attribute stuff is really important. And the interceptions aren't as important. It's you need that passes defended, and you need to make sure that you're not allowing the quarterback to reach the wide receiver. That is the goal of a corner. If you can shut down one side of the field, you're good. You're good. And Banks looks like he can develop into that. So that's why that combine stuff is probably his first pro, because Gonzalez has good physical attributes, and he can have the same effect. But Banks has been proven in man type of stuff, and has that bigger build, uh, wider, more buff type of build, not vertically, but that type of build, and has really been a more physical type of guy with more ups and more physical attributes overall. So it's pretty good for him. Another pro is he has a 71.4 passer rating against. That was in his senior season, his first full season, because in 2021 and 2020, those other seasons that he played, he only played 5 games, and then he tore a ligament in his shoulder, I believe, in 2021. So he only played 2 games there, only played 54 defensive snaps. But in his senior season, which is why he got drafted, and his physical attributes, obviously, but this got him on the radar of NFL teams. Had a 71.4 passer rating, and that's not horrible. It's not what I like to see in draft prospects, just because it's just kind of middling. It's not elite, but if you watch his film, you can see times where, especially on outside routes and vertical routes, he contains the hell out of those routes. And his physicality is, you can't really teach physicality too much. It's either you kind of, you have that dog in you, or you don't have that dog in you. And Deonte Banks, he has it. Just super, super physical, beating guys and pushing them over to the line so they really don't have enough space to get around him, and kind of contains a whole side of the field, which you really want to see in a player. And a 71.4 isn't bad. It was constant with what he had in his previous 2 seasons. Obviously didn't play too much, but in his freshman season, his redshirt freshman season, he had 65.6 on 280 defensive snaps, and then on 54, he had a 69.8 in 2021. So it went back up once he played 680 defensive snaps. But again, he's playing in the Big Ten. He's the number 1 corner on this team, the number 1 outside boundary corner. You're going to get targeted, and that's going to happen. But if we're looking at first round corners, that's kind of the passer rating that you're going to get. Christian Gonzalez was a high 60s type of guy. Witherspoon was a whole nother deal. He had I believe like a 30 something or a 24 passer rating. Sauce Gardner-esque. It was this past season for him was tremendous again, but he doesn't have the physical tools. We don't know how he's really going to translate over to the NFL, because you got to have the physical stuff to match up with wide receivers in the NFL, and the mental side of stuff can keep you in there, but only for so long. So he has all that physical tools. He has all the physical tools to do it, and a 71 isn't that bad, especially for a corner. That can keep you in the league for a while, and you're a decent number 1 corner with a 71. Obviously, we're gonna want to have that improve a little bit, but we'll see. It's decent for a corner, but necessarily that's not what we're drafting Deonte Banks to be. We're drafting Deonte Banks to develop all these tools that he already has, and to get him into more of that number 1 corner Sauce Gardner territory, which, I don't think Banks is ever going to reach that Sauce Gardner territory, because you just have to be so fluid, and, you have to be so focused, dialed in to be that good in zone coverage and man coverage, and just have that number 1 outside ability. And I don't think anybody's ever going to really match that, at least for the next few years. But, Banks is going to possibly, have a few seasons where he springs up and he is like a Tre'Davious White, or he is like a Stephon Gilmore. That's the type of corner that we want out of him. Our Brandon Browner, for example, was very good physical corner. That wasn't really super low in the passer rating category, but really made a difference, and came up in big time moments, was a physical guy with a good frame. And that's what Deonte Banks brings to the table. And just overall, I'm not too concerned about the passer rating against. I think it's pretty decent, and I think he's going to be improved, especially under the Giants tutelage. The other pro is he's a number 1 outside corner. Banks basically played his whole entire career at Maryland as the number one outside type of guy. If you look at all his tape, he's lining up outside every single time. Banks only lined up inside in the slot 13 times in his 2022 season. So overall, 680 defensive snaps. He had 13 in the slot and 618 as the outside corner. So he's not a slot corner type of guy. And obviously, you don't want to draft that in the first round. You'd like to see versatility, but in college, if you have that number one big outside corner like Banks, that huge frame, obviously you're going to put him as the number one outside guy. And in the first round, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a corner that can be on your team, run with the number one wide receiver on the opposition week in, week out, and have that for 10 or so years, have that guy not be too banged up. And I think that's what Deonte Banks brings to the table, just that size. As I said earlier, he just boxes the hell out of wide receivers at the college level. We'll see how it translates into the NFL. He might need to put some more pounds on, maybe get up to around 220 instead of be around 197. I said this about Sauce. But at corner, there's smaller guys, and this guy's already pretty jacked up from what we can see on the field. So I think maybe getting up a little more in pounds could be better, especially to give him a little bit more box versatility if they do need to move him around, because, if he doesn't work out at number one corner in the NFL and he doesn't really have any experience outside of that, it could screw him a little bit. But I think he does, and I'll get into this a little bit later, has kind of that box. Although he didn't get a lot of reps, you can see it in him, especially if he's the few snaps that he was playing inside. He kind of had a linebacker type mentality that looked like a box safety a little bit, and he has the frame for it to be kind of a box safety. So I think his path in the NFL is to be an outside corner and to be a really good one. But if all things fall apart, I as a coach, I would consider shifting him in a little bit more to fit that kind of like a Jordan Poyer type role, like um, Brian Daboll used to have with the Bills. The next one is he played a Big Ten schedule. So if we just look at his schedule from this last season, good opponents. Played Michigan, played them fairly decently, had one pass defended there, 3 tackles. Only lost by 7 there. A lot of that was because of their defense. Michigan State, Purdue, Indiana, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Penn State, Ohio State, Rutgers. They had good opponents here. He had 2 passes defended against C.J. Stroud, the second overall pick. Matched up fairly decently there. Obviously, Ohio State, Marvin Harrison Jr. and all those Ibuka, all those wide receivers at Ohio State, very good players. So it's good to see especially when you're evaluating, it's always good to see a corner have good games against good teams. I think that's pretty basic, right? Because, when you have a player like, for instance, Tariq Woolen coming out last season, his coverage rating was horrendous, but he was 6'5". He was a freak of nature. But that whole entire thing about Tariq Woolen was he was a developmental guy, and he came out of a shell really, really quick in that Pete Carroll defense because it fit him so well and he adapted. But we couldn't evaluate him. He was a 5th-round pick because no one knew what he could do coming out of UTEP because he played no one, right? And he played bad against them. So how is he going to play in the NFL? Well, you'd think he'd play horrible, but it was development. And Banks has played good against Big Ten opponents. So does he need that much development? Well, we'll see. But playing good against these Big Ten opponents in this one season shows that, hey, maybe we have something here in Deonte Banks. He's allowed receptions on less than half of his targets. If we go to his defensive snaps from the 2022 season, 384 coverage snaps. He only allowed 26 receptions on 60 targets for 258 yards. So 12 games, only allowing 250 yards. That's 2 100-yard games and a 50-yard game, basically. Minimal very minimal, and allowed half, less than half of his targets to be receptions. So tremendous stats there, and that's where you look at the 71.4 passer rating, and you say, well, that's a little high. But then you go into the actual completions and attempts, and you say, okay, this guy, he's gonna get thrown at, and every 1 out of 3 of basically a little more than that of the balls against him are gonna be caught. That's pretty good. That's a number one corner. Because most guys, if we looked at Trayvon Diggs in that season where he had a bunch of interceptions, right? This guy was allowing catch after catch after catch after catch after catch. It was like 70% of his of the balls thrown at him were getting caught. Banks, less than half. We're probably going to say around 40% of balls are getting caught against him. So that's pretty good share, and that's going to keep you in the NFL for a while, especially if he can keep that up in the big leagues. And I think obviously the physical attributes are there to keep him there. He can box out receivers going down the sideline. I said this earlier. He's super physical at the line. Any wide receivers can't really get jumps on him because he's putting his hands out there. His big, strong frame's going to keep them kind of there. If you watch any of his film, he really stalls guys there. And even if he doesn't, even if the wide receiver gets a little bit of a jump on him, he has that 4.35 speed. So he's going vertical down the sideline on the outside, and he always makes sure that his hips are there. His back is kind of to the ball, but he always has his head right there, ready to turn. His fluid hips that allow him to turn around pretty fast, and his long arms as well. Just everything about him is pretty perfect. Aside from the 6 foot tall frame, which you would want a little bit more on the outside, but I think it's still pretty good. And he boxes guys down the sideline really well, which is good because you don't want him breaking into the inside at all. You want to keep him hugging the sideline so you can have that advantage where they don't really have any space for the ball, but you have all this space on the outside. That's what you want with your number one corner, especially when he's going up. He's going to go up against guys like Devontae Adams and all these guys on the outside, big outside guys that have just been exposing NFL cornerbacks as of late, especially as the game evolves into the pass. You want a guy like Deonte Banks. He's instinctive against the run. If you watch any of his film, especially coming from a guy that lines up on the outside, for the amount of tackles that he gets, it's kind of really impressive. At least on film, it might not show up in the box score as much. Against Purdue, he had 6 total tackles. It kind of does, but if you watch him on film, especially, he might not get the most tackles ever, and you shouldn't expect that out of a number one corner. But he'll read it really, really fast. He'll come in. Just the instincts are really good, and that's why I say that he'd be good as box safety, lining up more inside. Because if his instincts are that good, coming from the outside, coming from the sideline, basically, and he can get in there, imagine what he can do kind of as a box on the inside, just coming straight in. He might have to beef up a little bit more. As I said, 220 would probably be the goal for that if he wanted to move in more inside. But I think he, has great instincts on the run, and I like to look at corners as more coverage guys. I'll bring up Sauce again. We did an evaluation on him, so and he's just my perfect example of a coverage guy. You want to out of a corner, at least for me, I want a guy that can play man coverage, that's physical. I don't really care too much about being overly physical. I think it's better to be overly physical than not physical at all and letting a guy go by you. You're focusing more on the coverage. You're gonna want linebackers and the D line and your safeties to be more of the guys that handle the run, the tackles, and all that. You want your outside corner to be physical and to be more into the wide receiver and focusing on that. But when you can have both of them, that's perfect, and that's what Deonte Banks brings. He's also, he plays bigger than he is, and he's sticky and physical to the player. He doesn't really let him go anywhere. As I said, he boxes him down the sideline, doesn't really let anything go. So that's just really what Deonte Banks brings to the table. Big frame, good player, great instincts, good on the run, good in coverage. All around, when I looked at this guy, when I looked at his film, was just just perfect. Just a perfect player, and my favorite corner in the draft. So that's his pros. We're going to take a quick little break. We're going to get into the cons of Deonte Banks. Not a lot, but there are some. So we'll get into that and finish up the episode. And we are back with the cons for Deonte Banks. So, Deonte Banks, as I said before, there's not a lot of bad things to talk about in his game. He's big, he's fast, he, can jump to the high heavens. I mean, the guy is insane. I love him with all my heart. Probably my favorite prospect, just because I love corners so much. It tends to be a corner every year. It was Sauce last year. It's Deonte Banks this year. So, I don't have a lot to complain about, but nobody's perfect, and neither is Deonte Banks. So there is still some cons, some red flags that I wasn't too concerned about, but we'll see here. So the first con is he gives a little too much room in under routes. Under routes across the middle, gives a little too much there, and doesn't really allow for his ability that he has on the outside, boxing players into the sideline. He can't really use the sideline to his advantage when he's going on into the inside. And you think that 4.35 speed would kind of help him, but it looks like he tries to bait people a little too much instead of really focusing on what makes him good and that physical play on the outside, which he could jam people trying to go onto the inside, which he really doesn't do, it seems like, on a lot of these reps. And I think that's why they don't play him inside so much. They don't play him in the slot, because he just doesn't really have that ability to cover guys in the middle for some reason. And that could be a really, really big thing in the NFL that could really damage him. But I don't think that it's too big of a concern, because I think he's going to adapt to it. And at the same time, when you're playing number one outside, a lot of those routes are going to be what he saw in college, those verticals, posts and things of that sort, screens that are really more played to the outside that he's going to be dealing with. So he's more of a down the field type of corner, and that's what you're going to expect out of a number one guy anyways. But the versatility is a concern, and he's going to need to work on the more interior routes that he seems to be lacking on. And I think that's more of a mental type of thing that he's going to need to figure out, because he has the physical attributes to get that done. It's just he seems to calculate it wrong, and seems to go for the bait of the quarterback a little too much on the inside stuff, which is really the routes where he shouldn't be baiting. It should be more the routes that he's good at that he should be baiting. But nonetheless, it seems like a little bit of a mental problem there that Banks has. There's not a ton of tape on him, and he only played one full season, so that's another con. There really isn't a ton of tape, and we saw the same thing with Witherspoon. Although Witherspoon did have the tape, it was just bad tape. He only had one season of good tape. This thing with Banks is he had good tape. It just wasn't a lot of good tape because of the next con, which was he had season-ending shoulder injury in 2021, and he only played 2 games there, which he didn't really show a lot. Those games were against, he had a game against Howard, and he had a game against West Virginia. And the West Virginia game, he had 5 total tackles, so it was good on that side, but didn't really have any. Didn't have a single pass defended, and didn't have any interceptions that game. Nothing really thrown at him. Same with the Howard game where they won 62-0. Again, that's Howard, so I don't really care even if he did do much on that one. So didn't show a lot there, but his 2022 stats show a lot of potential, and I think that is something that is good for him. And I think the lack of tape is concerning, yes, and same with the shoulder injury, which, because obviously you want mobility in your arms. It seems like it didn't really affect him that much, because he did good in 2022, which is what got him here. And his physical attributes still seem like they're perfectly fine, and a young guy like that, you'd expect that. So that's good signs that didn't really affect him that much. But again, only one full season, and having those injury problems could be a thing in the line that could possibly kill off his career if it's not taken too seriously. Statistical categories, as I said earlier, they're not outstanding, but they're not bad either. They're just kind of middling, and that's something that I think will come in time, and something that will be developed. And even if it doesn't develop and it stays in that kind of range, but adapting to the NFL, I think he'll be just fine there. He turns his back a lot. It leaves him vulnerable. He's not really looking at the ball too much. And in the college, this really didn't hurt him too much, just because of his physical size, and because he stays so close to the wide receiver. He kind of got lucky on a lot of those times. but he needs to focus on getting his head around more. And he has really good hips that he uses a lot, but he needs to use them a little bit more because he just tends to do really good on a box out, get the wide receiver to the sideline, but he's always kind of not really getting himself around enough where his back is to the ball, and that leads to a lot of you know messed up coverages, and something that NFL quarterbacks will expose time and time again. So he needs to fix that before he can really get onto the field here. And again, not a ton of versatility. We'll go back to the snap counts. Banks only played, uh, you know, 20, let's see here, 37 snaps in the box in his senior season, and only 13 snaps in the slot and 5 snaps deep. He played 618 snaps as the number one outside corner. I mean, that's his position. He doesn't have a ton of versatility. I think versatility can be built in. You can get built-in versatility by coaches. It could just be the system at Maryland that really just caged him in. I personally think that he could play some box stuff. I think box is pretty easy to learn from a guy in the secondary, especially with that size and those intangibles. As I said, he's really fast to the run from the outside, so why not push him a little bit more inside, bulk him up a little bit more, and boom, you got a box safety right there for you in Deonte Banks. But I think his bread and butter is made as the number one outside corner, and I think that's not going to change in the NFL. I think that's just going to get better in the NFL. So the versatility is a little concerning, but I think it can be built in, and I think that even so, he'll be okay just working as the number one outside corner. But those are my cons for Deonte Banks. Not a lot. Again, I think this guy is just ultra talented, ultra talented. The kid is a freak of nature, and hopefully he'll be able to stay healthy, just like JL Skinner, who was another one of my favorite guys. Both very physical, good on the run, good in coverage type of guys, with the same type of build almost. Obviously, Skinner being a little bit more tall, but kind of that same build, same mentality. Put your head down and get to work type of players in the secondary, which I love. Those guys, awesome, but also both kind of tired with injuries that kind of derailed them a little bit. So we'll see what happens with my man Deonte Banks, but those are my cons for him. Like I said, though, I'm not too concerned with it. So we'll get into the comparisons quickly. My peak, I think, for Deonte Banks is Stephon Gilmore. Gilmore was a guy that had that low passer rating grade when he won Defensive Player of the Year with the Patriots, but, was a number one outside corner coming in with the Bills and was just kind of average with that passer rating type of thing, but was still really, really effective and was good for them and was good with the Patriots and got big contracts and was a big playmaker for both teams. And I think he's very comparable to Gilmore in a way, and I think that's his peak as that number one outside corner that could win a Defensive Player of the Year someday. And I think they compare very well together. And my floor is a less versatile Byron Jones. Byron Jones shifted up to safety towards the end of his career. Well, was a safety and then shifted into corner, and vice versa. And the comparison here is they were both combine freaks, both super fast, great vertical jumps. Just could play a lot on the field, and I think Banks doesn't have the versatility that Jones has. Jones was a little bit of a slimmer frame than what Banks is, but I think that it's pretty comparable. They're both basically the same size, besides for the frame size, and both kind of had that athleticism that really stood out to them. And I think that Banks, unless it's like an injury thing, he pretty much has the Byron Jones, a less versatile Byron Jones, is a pretty high floor. So I think he has a pretty high floor. Might have a low ceiling. We will see, but I think he's going to be a dependable guy in the NFL nonetheless. And my grade for him is A minus. I will give him an A minus, and I projected him as a first round pick. Early. My value for him was like early to mid first round. He fell into the back half of the first round, so I think it is a pretty good snag for the Giants. One of my highest graded players of this season. So I think the Giants got away with one right here, and I think they will be very appreciative. So let's get into this. I'll analyze some plays for you here for Deonte Banks. Obviously, using shout out to California highlights. You know, great little videos here of just some plays from draft prospects that they've had. We'll go into the first ones against Indiana University. He's playing the outside, two-step, jams the guy into the sideline, covering him all the way, and basically falls the ball. And this is an interception one. He has a lot of ones where it's just passes defended, but gets his hand on the wide receiver a little bit, batting around, and just complete box out of number 10 in Indiana. This one, he's playing a little bit back, so not jamming, but falling all the way on a wide receiver that's going on a bit of a wheel route, and just follows him all the way down the field. Ends up getting an interception, but I don't really care about that because it's just a little bit of a jump. I care more about the deflection here and the follow on a talented quarterback like CJ Stroud, who usually doesn't make a lot of these mistakes rolling out. But Banks comes back to the ball, knocks it out of Marvin Harrison Jr.'s hands, and ends up with the interception coming off of his teammates' hands. This one against Purdue, again, down the sideline, following the guy. Should have picked that one off, but was basically playing receiver because he was so ahead, and that speed shows. This one against SMU, the back is turned, but following the ball the whole way, and gets a hand up in there. See, he's always tight on the receiver, and this one is an inside route, and then it pops back out. He's following the whole way, doesn't let the wide receiver get loose, and basically he's just there the whole time. This one against Michigan and talented J.J. McCarthy. Very good play there by Deonte Banks. Here, the last one we'll do against Wisconsin, running with them off of a jam. Hands, boom, right there. And, I think that can get him in trouble in the NFL. And I mean, it always will with like pass interference and stuff like that. They'll get stricter and stricter with that. But it's, again, like I said, it's better to have a more physical guy than a guy that's not going to be physical and is going to let a guy blow by him like a Tyreek Hill. Banks isn't going to let that happen because of his speed and his physicality. So I just love guys that get their hands in there and really get, fight for the ball and try to knock it down. Those are my type of players, not the ball hawks that are just trying to bait the whole time. And Deonte Banks certainly is not that. So that is the scouting board episode 12, Deonte Banks. The next episode will be Purdue corner Corey Trice, who's a guy who went in the fourth round. I believe the fourth round. He went in the later rounds, day 3. But overall, a really good corner from Purdue. Not as supremely talented as Deonte Banks, but a great corner nonetheless. And that will be the next episode that will be coming soon. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, enjoy this analysis. Leave your comments down below on the YouTube, which is Second Take. If you are listening to this on Spotify or anything like that, go to YouTube and search up Second Take. This should be on the channel, and you guys can check that out if you want the video form. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at Second Take Show, or follow us on Instagram at Second Take Show. Also, shout out quickly to our other show, Second Take, which should be out soon, but we will see. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.